and welcome to this week's training for corporate personnel involved in their company's immigration program. I'm Chad Graham with the law firm of Graham Adair, and I'm joined by my partner, Sam Adair. Sam, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me today, Chad.
So we're going to talk about something kind of exciting here with this phenomenon of the H-1B registrations just sort of skyrocketing. Last year, there were almost 484,000. This year, we don't know how many there are going to be, but unfortunately, the available number of 85,000 is staying the same. People are getting pretty creative and trying to figure out how to maintain work authorization for employees without necessarily having them go through the standard process of an H-1B. And in years past, the recommendation was always to, get an H-1B first, because then you're in a dual intent status, or if you're an L1, then maybe you wouldn't need to. But make sure that you get into a dual intent status before you go for a green card. But in this day and age, we have people who are, say, in TN status or F1 OPT who have tried several times and have missed the cap. And the question is, can they just skip the H-1B step and go straight for a green card? And the answer is maybe, right, Sam? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a pretty solid maybe. Yeah, it is a possibility, although I think it can be a really good creative solution. I would say that government processing times are really making it a much bigger challenge than it used to be. But essentially, in order to do this, a company is just going to jump straight in to the permanent residence process. And as we know, that often involves three separate applications, the first being the perm, the second, the I-140, and then finally the adjustment of status application with its corresponding work and travel authorization requests for the EAD and the AP. So it's a big step for a company to do this, I think. And, given some of the restrictions and risks around it, I think it's something that we should probably talk about in a little more detail here.
Yeah, that sounds great. So for a company that is looking to do this and they want to potentially proceed with this, what are some things you would tell them that they should be considering?
Well, I think the first thing that a company needs to think about is the timing of this. Today, March of 2023, the perm process itself is taking almost 2 years. That initial prevailing wage determination request is taking up to 12 months to get back. You then have a couple of months of recruitment, and then processing times on that actual perm application are running close to 8 months. So you're 23, 24 months just to get through the perm. And then you're going to have to also get through the I-140 as well as be able to file that adjustment of status application. So timing is key. Second, there are going to be travel restrictions potentially for your employee if you jump into the green card process for them while they're not in a dual intent visa classification. And so that international travel could be curbed, and they're going to need to be aware of that. And third, I think that cost is a significant piece of this. The green card process is very involved. It's not inexpensive. And so a lot of companies want to weigh that as they look at this as a possible option.
Okay, and so priority dates are going to obviously play a role in this. And just really quickly, a priority date is the date the person's first step toward the green card process is taken. So typically, this is the perm labor certification, and it's the date that perm labor certification is filed. And I like to use an analogy. It's like you walk into a deli, where there's those old rolls, and you take your number, and that sort of marks your place in line. And so a priority date kind of operates the same way. It marks a person's place in line for being able to get a green card. So Sam, tell us a little bit about how a person's priority date plays into this.
Yeah, so I mean, the priority date is really one of the biggest factors in determining eligibility for when somebody's going to be able to file for that last stage of the permanent residence process. And every year there are a limited number of green cards or immigrant visas that can be issued, just like with H1Bs. And those are allocated based on country of birth and priority date. And historically, for the last 16, 18 years, the priority dates have really impacted individuals from India and China in particular. And because of some of the backlogs for Indian and Chinese nationals, the green card process could simply take too long for them to be able to bypass and not go through the H-1B first. So that's definitely going to be something to think about. Even in the higher preference categories like the EB1 category, right now there is retrogression for Indian and Chinese nationals. And so this may simply not be a viable option for individuals from India or China, given the current state of immigrant visa availability.
Okay, so let's say you've got somebody who's not from India or China, they're in F1 status on OPT, the company decides to go ahead and start their perm process. With the long processing times, in the meantime, we've got a new H1B cap that comes up. Do you recommend that the person continue trying for the H1B cap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense to continue to try for the H1B simply because there are so many variables. I mean, while we've seen Department of Labor processing times on perm go up over the last couple of years, there's no indication that we're going to see that trend reverse. And so while somebody is pursuing the perm and the permanent residency, it's still possible and permissible to enter them into the H1B lottery. And I would just say, given the low cost of entry into that electronic lottery, it absolutely is advisable that companies continue to pursue that. I think that as companies look at this as a solution for employees, it should be considered part of an overall comprehensive strategy, not just putting all of your eggs into the permanent residence basket.
Great. Thanks, Sam. And thank you all for joining us today. As we sit here waiting to find out how many people registered for the H1B cap, it'll be really interesting to see. But what we have seen as a trend is that the likelihood of being selected in the lottery has gone down every year. Looking at some creative options is something that companies should definitely be doing, and potentially bypassing the H1B could be one that they look at. Again, thanks for joining us. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.